Right now, the NYPD mourns one of its own, then turned their backs on Mayor Bill de Blasio. Are the city's finest acting like the finest, or are they going too far in their own protests? Plus, reforming the Port Authority, or not so much. The governors of New York and New Jersey veto a reform bill that had unanimous support from each state's respective legislatures. We'll get into why and what this means for the otherwise loosely regulated behemoth in our region. And later, Jeb Bush soars to a big lead in early Republican 2016 polling. Is this surge for real, or is Jeb just the latest GOP flavor of the week? Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Andrew Whitman. Richard French has the night off. Thanks so much for joining us. We begin in New York City, where today the rift between Mayor Bill de Blasio and the NYPD appears to be widening.
It's now my pleasure to introduce the mayor of the city of New York, the Honorable Bill de Blasio.
Thank you. Congratulations, officers.
That was the mayor being heckled and booed at a police graduation ceremony at Madison Square Garden today. A few people in the crowd also turned their backs to the mayor. That a similar sight to what we saw Saturday during the funeral for slain NYPD officer Rafael Ramos. Ramos and his partner, Wenjin Liu, were shot and killed sitting in their patrol car, ambushed by a gunman who had posted online his anger over the Eric Garner decision. During the funeral Saturday, officers turned their backs to a video monitor showing de Blasio's remarks. It's a protest we also saw 1 week earlier when cops turned their backs on the mayor as he entered a hospital after Ramos and Liu had been shot. All the backturning followed the mayor's comments in the wake of the Garner grand jury decision, specifically that the mayor and his wife warned their biracial son Dante about what to do and what not to do when dealing with the police. This weekend, former Mayor Rudy Giuliani and current Police Commissioner Bill Bratton both spoke about the officers' silent protests at Officer Ramos's funeral.
I certainly don't support that action yesterday. I think it was very inappropriate at that event. That funeral was held to honor Officer Ramos, and to bring politics or to bring issues into that event, I think, was very inappropriate.
The mayor is not in any way to be treated with people turning their backs. Doesn't matter if you like the mayor or you don't like the mayor. You have to respect the mayor's position. I don't support that. But I do believe Mayor de Blasio should apologize to the New York City Police Department.
One additional note, funeral arrangements are now set for NYPD officer Wenjin Liu, who was murdered alongside Officer Ramos. A wake will be held from 1 to 9 p.m. on Saturday. Liu's funeral will be held the following day at 10 a.m. Both services will be held at a funeral home in Brooklyn. I want to turn this over to our panel now. We're joined tonight by Jeannie Zaino, professor of political science at Iona College and a professor of campaign management at NYU. Dominic Carter, political journalist and author. Tom Doherty is a Republican strategist, a partner at Mercury, and a former advisor to New York Governor George Pataki. And Richard Brodsky is a former Democratic New York State Assemblyman, now a senior fellow at Demos and a professor at NYU. Welcome. I want to get everybody's reaction to what they heard at the Ramos funeral on Saturday and the NYPD's reaction to it. Dominic, I want to start with you because you posted something on Huffington Post today about the reaction of, or the cops' perspective in all of this. I'm curious about your thoughts, what you saw Saturday.
I'm not trying to duck on this issue, Andrew, but I really can understand. I can understand both sides. I don't understand what's so offensive in the mayor saying that to his biracial son, be careful. After all, I grew up on that tradition. Every African-American Latino friend I have, male, also grew up on that tradition. But on the other hand, I do understand a little bit that when you sit down and talk to Pat Lynch, and this is what I wrote about today at the Huffington Post, he feels that every police officer is being painted with the broad brush of racism, and he feels that that's greatly unfair. So I really can't see it both ways, but it's offensive to turn your back on the mayor, especially at a police officer's funeral.
Tom, your reaction?
I think that it is something that has been building over the last 18 months. If you look at a poll that goes back about 18 months, 70% police approval rating in New York City. After the mayoral election, after what we've gone through this year, 54%. I think that it's okay for the mayor to have given the words about Dante if he had added the great job in what the city and what the police officers do on a daily basis. That would have made sense. It would have sent a very good message. I agree with everybody that the turning of their back on the mayor, I think, is really disrespectful. I think we hold the office in regard, not a particular individual always, And I think that today even, I think it's going to reach a point where de Blasio, if he's smart, will continue to go to these type of events. He will start doing a better job of communicating with the police. It's then going to become incumbent on them to reach back out to him because the two need to work together.
Jeannie, I watched with concern on Saturday with the reaction from the cops, only because I can't help but feel like this is only going to inflame tensions or strain the city even further, which makes the police officers who are protesting potentially less safe. Do you think they're getting bad advice, bad leadership? Is it, what's your take?
You know, I agree with Tom. I think, unfortunately, this has been couched in terms of a reaction to what the mayor said about Dante after the Garner non-indictment. And I think this goes back many, many months earlier to the election, if not before. You can point to a number of times at which the tensions have flared between the NYPD and the mayor, or the incumbent mayor, or the candidate de Blasio, or as public advocate. And so, you know, to suggest that this is just a reaction to the non-indictment of Garner, I think is short-sighted. And I do agree that the police obviously made a mistake turning their back on the mayor at the funeral. And I think it's going to be incumbent on them, once the mayor reaches out across lines, to really try to heal this wound. And, you know, unfortunately, you know, it's hard to say. Have they received bad advice? I'm not certain. I don't know that they've gotten from leadership an indication that this is the way to proceed, but they have proceeded in this way. It's unprecedented, and it is unfortunate, I think, for the NYPD.
So, Richard, how do we start turning down the temperature in the city?
Well, that's the useful question. I'm not, if you're measuring good manners and bad manners, what some of the cops did was bad manners. If you're then saying they shouldn't do it, we respect the office, I don't buy that for a minute. I think they have every right to publicly state their views, even when I don't agree with their views.
Even when they're in uniform?
Yeah, within reasonable bounds. This was a dramatic, heartfelt moment. People reacted. In the long run, we're all better off by accepting the nature of the differences. The real trick is going to be to see whether anyone can make something useful out of this conflict. If the police unions and the mayor can find ways to make policing in New York better, safer, and more intelligent as a result of the conflict about the Garner and Ferguson matters, as well as the conflict that resulted when these two cops were murdered.
Could you imagine military officers turning their back on the President of the United States?
Thank God cops aren't military officers. This is America.
I'm sorry about that, but they work for the mayor, and they're there to protect and serve the city of New York. And quite frankly, when young kids see that, I think it sends a very bad message. You can protest. They have a right to protest. You can have tough union negotiations, but he is the mayor of the city of New York. Don't turn your back on him.
It was rude. I'm not for turning the back on him, but I think there's much too much attention being paid to the peripheral symbolism, while the real issue here is, do we need to change and reform policing? Are there issues that the cops and the community need to address? And whether the union and the mayor can become partners in that.
But you know, Andrew, what I'm concerned about, I'm sensing, and this has been building within me for a couple of days, it's almost like on this entire issue of an us versus them mentality. So in other words, if the mayor of New York dare shows an ounce of sympathy towards communities of color, then he's not supportive of the police. It shouldn't be that way, but that's the way it's starting to look.
That wasn't it. What triggered this, it wasn't the stuff about his kid. What triggered the intensity of the reaction from the unions was his use of the phrase alleged assaults about the bridge violence against 6 or 7 cops. He didn't say alleged.
I've talked to Mullins and to Lynch, and they both indicated that you are right, but they were also upset with the Dante comment.
They were also upset about a lot of things, but what
contract being one of them.
The mayor made some errors of judgment.
That's what I'm trying to find out.
The
what
notion
errors of judgment?
that when the cop gets hit across the face with an iron pipe, it's an alleged assault, was a mistake.
We agree on that.
Okay. But now, having said that, that's not the end of the world. And the real issue here are there policies and practices of the cops in New York City and elsewhere that need to be looked at? And can the mayor and the unions get together and look at it?
So I just want to return to what can or should be done to try to turn the temperature down in the city a little bit. What can police officers do? Are there civil rights leaders that need to get invested in this? What should the mayor do? Giuliani suggested that Mayor de Blasio apologize to the NYPD. Do you think that would help? What would you suggest?
I don't think an apology is necessary, but I do think a face-to-face meeting that is not, live on TV or is not covered at all, but a face-to-face meeting would go a long way. I think the mayor really needs to be the grown-up in the room and to bring these sides together and say, listen, how can we bridge this gap? I can't say enough that if you look back over the last 2 or 3 years, you will see a number of points having nothing to do with Garner or anybody else in this scenario where the tensions have gotten really enormous between the NYPD and the mayor or the incumbent mayor. And so those play a huge role in this. And I think to describe it as something to do with a comment about allegedly or a comment about his son, those are certainly points that inflamed the issue, but they are not what started this rift. It goes a long way. It goes back towards those lawsuits which the mayor decided to remove the city from. It goes back to a lot of different things. He needs a face-to-face meeting. He needs to be the grown-up in the room and to bring these sides together. If he does that, people will say, if the union doesn't respond, why aren't you meeting him halfway?
Want to go around the table quickly. Tom, what would your advice be on how to reduce the temperature?
I think that the mayor needs to reach across the aisle there and say, look, we have the best police force in the world. I have their back. I'm going to support them. We're going to have difficult times going forward on contract issues, et cetera, but make no mistake, this is the best police force in America.
There's nothing wrong with any of that. Pat Lynch is up for re-election in June. I don't think much is going to happen constructive until that re-election's over.
Dominic?
A lot of this has to do with the fact that they don't have a contract, that they want to break pattern bargaining what the other unions have received, including law enforcement unions. They want more put on the table for them, the PBA. You can't blame Pat Lynch for that. He is the president of the PBA. But also a big problem of this, and I agree with what the professor said, and also Tom, everyone, long-stemming problem, but also what's in the background of all of this, the PBA and many voters in the city don't like the fact that the mayor had Sharpton at City Hall on one side, chastising the police commissioner on the other side.
All right, we want to turn the same question over to you at home. Head to Facebook, head to Twitter, sound off on today's question. What should be done to soothe tensions in New York? This brings us to our look at our still life photo of the day. Sadly, it's in the wake of more anti-police violence. Members of the Los Angeles Police Department searching all night for a suspect accused of ambushing 2 patrol officers. 2 men fired shots at the officer's car. No one was hurt. 1 person was taken into custody. The other remains at large. Take a quick break here on RFL. When we come back, the governors get local lawmakers fired up. Cuomo and Christie team up for dual vetoes of bills to rein in the Port Authority, bills that enjoyed almost unprecedented support. We'll be right back.